Before we jump into the episode today, I want to share something with you from my heart. First of all, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really can't tell you how much your support means to me. We've been doing the podcast now for almost 4 years. I can't even believe it. And I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you that listens, shares an episode with your friends, sends me a DM or a text message letting me know how an episode resonated with you or any aha moments. Seriously, I couldn't be more grateful to be able to create this podcast. It has been such a blessing in my life, and I love hearing the ways it's been able to provide value in yours as well. One thing you might not know is how much work it takes to be consistent with a podcast. In fact, did you know that the majority of podcasts don't make it past episode number 10? And we are well beyond that. And it's just a lot thinking of the episodes, recording them, editing them, managing the guests, making sure that everything runs smoothly and gets uploaded consistently and regularly. And so that's why I have created an amazing opportunity for you to support the podcast monetarily. And in exchange for that, you will get exclusive premium subscriber content. So for as little as $3 a month, you can become a premium subscriber of the podcast. And every month I will upload new voice-guided workouts and breathwork meditation audio for you. So that way you can work out with me, coaching you in your ears. You can also take a moment to reduce your stress and relax and come down and ground down with one of my breathwork audios. So if that is on your heart to support the podcast for as little as $3 a month to become a premium podcast subscriber, I can't tell you how much that means to me and the growth of this podcast. I appreciate you. If you're interested, click the link in the description, become a premium podcast subscriber, new content every month, and while supplies last, I'll send you an exclusive podcast coffee mug so you can have your self-love and sweat coffee every morning. I appreciate you. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, break down barriers, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, Lunden Souza. Hey, have you grabbed your free Self-Love and Sweat monthly calendar yet? This calendar is so amazing. It comes right in your inbox every single month to help you have a little nugget of wisdom, a sweaty workout, a mindset activity, just a little something to help keep you focused and motivated and keep that momentum towards your goals. So every day when you get this calendar, you'll see a link that you can click that will lead to a podcast episode or a workout or something that will be very powerful and quick to read. And then you'll also see on the top left corner of every single day, there's a little checkbox in the calendar. And what that is that's for your one thing. You can choose one thing every month, or it can be the same, something that you want to implement, and make this something that you can easily implement, like daily meditation or getting a certain amount of steps or water, for example, and staying hydrated, and even taking your supplements. This can be something if you want to get more regular doing a particular habit and routine, you can choose what that checkbox means. So if you want your Self-Love and Sweat free monthly calendar delivered right to your inbox every month on the first of the month, go to lifelikeLondon.com/calendar, fill out the form really quickly, and you will have your calendar in your inbox within a few short minutes. That's lifelikeLondon, lifelikeLondon.com/calendar. Go get yours for free and enjoy this episode. Happy today and welcome back to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, and Self-Love and Sweat Radio. Wherever you're listening from today, welcome. Super excited to have you here, and also our guest for today. Our guest is William Siff. He's a licensed acupuncturist, clinical herbalist, author, and I asked you before we started this how to pronounce this word, but ethnobotanist. Did I say that right?
Yeah, ethnobotanist.
Ethnobotanist. big
Right.
word of the day for me, who practices Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine. He has worked with thousands of individuals and groups to successfully incorporate plant-based medicine into their lives for more than 2 decades. Along with running a busy clinical practice, his work with plants and people includes founding the popular Gold Thread Apothecary and Herb Farm, the Farm to Pharmacy educational program, and Gold Thread Tonics, a line of functional wellness drinks that I absolutely love. His work takes him around the world sourcing medicinal plants and creating long-lasting relationships and partnerships with the people who grow and gather them. He recently wrote and released the Plant Medicine Protocol book. It's a comprehensive and easy to follow guide to integrating healing plants into daily life. And this book, for those of you looking at the video, for those of you listening, you can't see it, but it's so beautiful. I have it on my coffee table. I feel like it's like the gift that keeps on giving, and I just keep learning so much. So I'm so excited to have you here, William, today on the show. I'm going to ask ethnobotanist, what is this? Tell me more.
Well, I studied medical anthropology when I was in college, and then I started graduate school in that same discipline. And then I switched over to actually, traditional and natural medicine. But I've always viewed the world through the lens, I guess you could say, of an anthropological lens, in the sense that how cultures utilize plants specifically for medicinal purposes, like a real interest and study in that for the past 20 years in person all around the world is kind of what ethnobotany is. I mean, there's a lot of directions ethnobotany can go. People can study how cultures use plants for food, for, aspects of their economic development and so on. But I was specifically interested in how cultures around the world have utilized medicinal plants for medicine. And of course, that fits perfectly well with becoming a practitioner of natural medicine, because all of this is rooted in something ancient, and something that has kind of been the norm for humans throughout the world since we've been humans. And also, people would find surprising that the vast majority of people still utilize medicinal plants for primary health care, for health optimization all throughout the world. 80% of the world uses plants on a daily basis, medicinal plants, for that purpose. And so it's great to talk about things and see things through that lens when I'm discussing the whole subject. And certainly it runs through the book in a large way as a central theme.
Cool. And so what I hear you saying is like, we're going back to our roots. We've always used this. This is like in our DNA of using plants as medicine. And you said 80% of the world is using plants as medicine. Is there some, like, is it mostly, I guess it's not a lot in the US, maybe I'm just guessing, but like, what are some plants that we use as medicine every day that maybe people use and aren't aware of? Like, in some cases, is it really like, we're using it, but we don't even realize it? What are some of those?
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, so on those statistics I was just mentioning, 80% of the world, that comes from the World Health Organization. And a lot of it is based on necessity, frankly. I mean, there's a lot of it is like, it's certainly about tradition and passing down what works generation to generation, but it's also based on necessity, because plants are inexpensive, they're accessible, they're, and they work, that's the main thing, but the idea here is like that what you were just bringing up is very interesting, because again, it's another big theme of the book, is like what's hidden in plain sight. That is actually a medicinal plant that has made it through the kind of gauntlet of Western culture, you could say, and is still used, but we don't really recognize what its medicinal value would be. And I often use, I think in the beginning of the book, I started off with black pepper as a very simple example. I mean, black pepper is available on every table in the world, pretty much. It's like, I make a joke in the book that it's probably on the International Space Station. It's on, every airline flight. You can get black pepper, but if you start looking into it, and this is again where ethnobotany comes in, you start looking into where does black pepper come from, and what is it? And it's a climbing vine that climbs up trees in tropical forests, originating from Southeast Asia. All over India is a big place where it grows. Now in Central and South America, it grows there too. It's pretty much anywhere where there's in the tropics. But it was used and traded as a spice for its flavor and its like ability to make bland food taste good. But that's one reason. The other reason, it was like very powerful antimicrobial components in black pepper, which was very important in days before refrigeration and when there was more communicable diseases going around, foodborne illnesses, things that were like the result of food hanging around too long. And then on top of that, when science starts to look into black pepper, oh, so many antioxidants in there, tremendously anti-inflammatory. It has components in it that improve circulation to the digestive tract. I mean, the spiciness and the flavor of black pepper, obviously we recognize on our tongue as pungency and spiciness, but what that is doing on our tongue, it's also doing throughout our whole GI tract. It's stimulating circulation and nerve current to the organs of digestion. That accelerates and improves and enhances the absorption of nutrients, the absorption of vitamins, and so on. So I could go on about black pepper. It has cognitive enhancing functions. I mean, the litany of things that it can help with are sort of like extensive, and yet we're consuming it every day. We aren't necessarily aware of that. Most people just think of it as a flavor enhancer. So there's a lot of things like that. Chamomile might be another one. Chamomile is something that is widely available. You can get it at like a Denny's or like an IHOP or something like that. You can get chamomile anywhere. At most restaurants and stores, it's always available. We think of it as kind of a gentle, simple thing that maybe tastes good and has a mild calming effect. And those are all true. But the idea being that it can also be used as a medicine. If we use these things continuously, consistently, in regular doses throughout our lives, their benefits start to accumulate and aggregate and add up. So what might be a nice cup of tea after a meal one day, fine. But if you consume that chamomile as a habit, as part of your self-care routine and ritual on a regular basis, it starts to become very potent as an anti-inflammatory for the gut, as a relaxant for the nerves that line the gut. So it's calmative to the whole nervous system. It's like these things, it's part of what I'm getting at is that some of these medicinal plants that are just sitting in our spice rack or on our kitchen table or in our cupboard, part of it is about how we use them and like how we apply them and at what dosage and what frequency that turns them into medicine, rather than something that might just be something to adorn a meal or just a kind of a ritual here and there for the flavor or whatever.
Yeah. And I think people listening are probably thinking about the pepper shaker in their home even differently. Or I think of chamomile tea as something just like to help us relax and fall asleep. And so that perfectly answered my question, because I figured there were certain things that we were already like in our programming using that now that we know, we might see that differently and have a different intention and awareness when utilizing that in our daily lives.
I'll say one more thing about that real quick. Just that, I often talk about because a lot of people want to know what's the simplest way to get started. And I just often talk about most people have spices in their cupboard or they have a spice rack, and spices, cinnamon, fennel, ginger, cumin, coriander, garlic, turmeric. These are incredibly powerful medicines actually to use. It's like the centerpiece of our kitchen is this like healing rack full of these amazing spices coming from all over the world. And I say that because a lot of people's health issues really begin and end in the gut. In Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, we say that the gut is the, sort of the origin point of 80% of chronic disease for one reason or another, and which is extensive. I can get into that. But the point being that things that we can use on a daily basis, these medicinal plants they're like the plants we eat and consume on a regular basis, vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, the things they're like that, but they exist on like the far end of the spectrum of plants in the sense that they contain phytochemicals and compounds that in abundance, in concentrated amounts, that are not in our vegetables and our fruits in those kinds of concentrations. So they're not meant to be something that you wouldn't have a big bowl full of turmeric for breakfast. It's like they're meant to adorn our meals and be supplemental in our meals. But without them, our meals are incomplete, because you're not getting this higher end of the spectrum of potent antioxidants and really important compounds that synergize and catalyze all kinds of important functions, foundational functions such as digestion. You know, when we consume a spice, again, this circulatory increase that goes, basically through the digestive system, it's allowing all the different secretions of acids and enzymes and hormones that are involved in digestion to work more efficiently. And who couldn't use a boost to their digestive function? And it's very simple, for pennies a day with the spice rack. And that's what every traditional cuisine is made of. If you think about what makes up a cuisine, like, food from the Mediterranean, we start thinking about oregano and rosemary and garlic and basil. And when we think about, Southeast Asian, we might think of Thai basil and galangal and ginger and curries in India. And it's those spices, those culinary spices, that really make the cuisine medicinal, healing as we're just living.
Yeah,
So
and I think we probably think that those herbs and spices are there to enhance the flavor of the food without thinking about what's happening after we chew and swallow them. And like you mentioned, digestion, which is, something I think we can all use a little help with for sure.
yeah.
When it comes to, so there's two components I want to focus on today, because I think this is a topic that comes up a lot from my listeners. Also, like personally, I'm curious, and it has been part of my journey, is nervous system regulation and natural sources of energy. So just a quick backstory on me. I had a lot of hormonal issues, PCOS, a lot of things that I was able to reverse naturally with doctors like yourself, with natural remedies and things like that. And so a lot of adaptogens, a lot of medicinal mushrooms were part of this like nervous system regulation component, because I was just go, doing all the things, masking some of the healing just by doing more. And then I was addicted to coffee, like just all the time, caffeine all the time, to just get that next win, to do the next thing that I realized was not working for me. It was actually like working against me. And so I want to talk a little bit about natural plant remedies to help with our nervous system regulation, and then ways that we can get that energy and cognitive boost naturally without needing to like chug the monsters, have the extra, 3 or 4 cups of coffee, because I know there are some really awesome medicinal plants that can help us with that. So how about we start with like nervous system regulation and ways to really like come down and land a little bit. I know that adaptogens have been so helpful for me. So maybe we could touch there a little bit.
Yeah, that's obviously a big subject. It's like something that almost virtually everyone I see in the clinic has some aspect of nervous system dysregulation, or like they come in with a main complaint that ultimately stems back to nervous system dysregulation. Oftentimes it's hyperactivity of the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times hyperactivity then leads to exhaustion, because we're spending a lot of energy we're spinning essentially, we're like spinning energy, and it's not promoting any benefit in that sense, and it's preventing rest and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that going around, of course. I would say that, like, to break it down, one of the things that there's a category of medicinal plants called nervines, which traditionally they have different names in different traditions, but nervines are medicinal plants that benefit the nervous system in some form or fashion.
I like that name. It's easy to memorize. Nervines and nervous system. Cool.
Right. And they fall into different categories. A lot of it's based upon either their target, of what aspect of the nervous system they're benefiting or impacting. Some of it is about their strength, their relative strength. Some of them are stronger than others. And the form, for example, like some of them are essential oils. Some of them are, medicinal plants that you consume as tea. Some of them are more in the supplemental category, or tinctures or something. When it comes to nervines and when it comes to nervous health, nervous system health, one of the things that's apparent is that we want to prevent the coiling up of the nervous system that occurs throughout the day, that then we expect or like sort of wish would unravel in the evening to get us to come back down to baseline and then below baseline so we can rest deeply. A lot of times people's rest and sleep issues are coming mostly from what they're doing in the day, how the nervous system is getting tense and coiled up and hyperactive and building up a charge, basically. We're stimulated and we're our whole nervous system and our endocrine system are dumping chemicals into our body, and we're essentially generating a charge of electricity in our nerves that is like leading to potential energy, ready to go-ness. And yet, a lot of times what we're doing is not that nervous system charge is being built up. It's not actually, it doesn't have an outlet, you know, it's a lot of times it's happening it's mental. So it might be happening in the midst of a meeting or some kind of thing where your body is kind of relatively sedentary, but your nervous system is all jacked up because your mind is like sped up and creating this like essentially a fight or flight reaction at a
And
low
all the
level,
thoughts that might be happening of what's going on between our ears in the meeting or whatever. I like that visual, like you said, of coiling up where you're just like tensing up, even in a sedentary position, even when you might not be doing something physically demanding. What's going on in our mind can even pull us in and coil us up a little bit.
Exactly. And so what is that? So it's like thinking of it as nervous system as like this charge that's like now got nowhere to go, that we built up all this charge and now it's got nowhere to go. So a lot of times it's dumped first in the muscles, and the nerves are intertwined like spaghetti. So when we have excess nervous system charge, it first results in tension, the muscle tension, the muscle readiness. And so the objective is first to consider like herbs that aren't sedating, for example. What we're talking about in this metaphor is like we need more flow. In Chinese medicine, we talk about qi. In Ayurveda, we talk about prana. And it's the life force. It's the nervous system. It's energy flow. And if we can allow energy to flow, and of course that's like breathing and, you know, sort of governing somehow, like having a relationship to our mind where we're not latching on to every thought and then like going with it and creating more tension and so on. It's all about flow. So certain medicinal plants in the nervine category are very good at untying the knots in our nervous system, you could say, and in a gentle way, in a way that's not sedating. In fact, we gain energy when our nervous system is flowing properly, because when it's all coiled up, you can think of it like a hose. If the nozzle's on full blast, if there's kinks at the end of the hose, you have this little trickle. But the hose at the origin point is on full blast. So it's actually like too much energy over here, not coming out over there. So you want to untie those knots. And that happens a lot of, so let me just get to what, like, so for example, I just mentioned chamomile. That's a good one.
Cool.
Lemon balm is a good one. Peppermint, lavender, linden, rose. These are very simple herbs that can be consumed as tea. They're available in capsules. They're available as liquid extracts. But they're common to find people consuming these kinds of herbs after a meal as like an offering. Like, can I have some peppermint tea after my meal? But actually, they're very good to drink throughout the day for people who are coiled up in this way that I was just talking about and generating excess tension, because they relax the enteric nerves in the gut. And there's so many nerves in our gut that is where we first hold our tension. Most of us are tense. If we're feeling tense, yes, we might feel neck and shoulder tension, and might feel the back of our head might get tense. But a lot of times, if you trace the origin point, it's like we're holding all the tension in our gut, in this area. And that's because it's so densely lined with nerves. It's a place where we feel very vulnerable. And the herbs I just mentioned are very, very good. They're antispasmodic is one of their terms, and they relax the enteric nerves directly. They allow space to occur here. That's why we consume them after meals, because they relax the whole gut region, which allows more space, which improves digestion. But just during the day, that can also encourage better breathing habits. A feeling of ease here translates into ease throughout the entire body. And so I recommend people consume these things kind of, you eat your breakfast after maybe another, half an hour, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, you're in your office, you're at your desk, and you have a strong cup of lemon balm tea. I have it right here. And you just sip on it throughout the day. And that will help to sort of siphon off some of the accumulated tension, so that when you go back home and your day is over or whatever you're doing at night, you're not having to like get rid of a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, it's not like there's going to be nothing, and you certainly exercise at the end of the day, or taking a walk or doing something to shift gears can help to remove it. But you don't want a whole backlog that then accumulates day after day after day. So we want to to reduce the possibility of generating this tension in a gentle way that's non-sedating. Because when you consume these types of things, think about like peppermint. People don't realize peppermint's very antispasmodic, but it's also got that like refreshing peppermint flavor, which is also stimulating. So
Yeah,
it's both.
stimulating, awakening. And when you were talking about, what were the nerve names again that you mentioned that are in our gut?
The enteric nerves.
Enteric nerves. And for those listening and not watching, a lot of those nerves you mentioned are in like that solar plexus gut space and like in our heart space. And I was just thinking, I just thought of this when you mentioned peppermint, and also like our lifestyles of being seated and kind of more hunched over, closing off some of those spaces that you mentioned where those nerves kind of congregate, if you will. And when I smell peppermint, my whole physiology changes. Like I smell it, I sit up straight, like it brings an awakening and kind of like an opening in my breathing pathways. And it just changes the posture. And I just kind of noticed that in terms of, when I smell peppermint, it's like this awakening and this opening, especially in that space that you mentioned where a lot of those nerves congregate. So anyways, just an observation, learning moment.
No, that's great. That's actually great. And that's the next thing I was going to say too. You're right. It's got an effervescence, and that is another way to utilize the nervine category of herbs throughout our day to day. For example, like having an essential oil diffuser around your home or your workplace or whatever. This is one of the best things to do because fragrance directly impacts our limbic system. It goes right in through the olfactory system into the brain, into the nervous system. There's no needing to digest anything, and it's immediate. And the fragrances that, for example, fragrances like peppermint or lemon verbena or rosemary. Now, these things can be uplifting and promote this flow that I'm talking about, this ease and flow where the nervous system knots are getting untangled. And having it diffusing as an aromatic vapor in the background of wherever you are is a subtle input, but actually it yields tremendous benefits over time. It's not some woo-woo thing. It's actually really potent. It has to do with, again, first of all, the more we contact a fragrance and associate it with the state that we're hoping to attain. So if we're like, okay, I'm going to get to work, I start to breathe in my rosemary oil, and you're going to develop new neural networks that start to associate the fragrance with the activity and the intention. And that's important because, for example, like in religious ceremonies all over the world, frankincense is used. And frankincense, in certain places like in Japan, you'll find sandalwood and agarwood in different temples as soon as you walk in. When you walk into one of these places, these fragrances are not there just randomly. They're there because they calm the nervous system and they allow us to feel more open and receptive and out of our like agenda, ambitious, driven mind state, and more receptive and intuitive and relaxed and open to what other inputs are available through other means, and the more people then associate frankincense or sandalwood or whatever it is, and they would immediately be able to shift into that state because they already know that fragrance, and it's all subconscious. That fragrance means something. It makes me feel a certain way, but it also means I'm crossing a threshold into a different place, a place where I'm going to drop all that stuff and be in a whole nother state. So fragrance is very powerful, and we can utilize it in our homes. And it's and like, again, lavender, neroli, rose, these ones I just mentioned, sandalwood, frankincense, clary, sage. There's so many. They, when you diffuse them around the home, or you put a few drops in your hand and you do some deep palm inhalations a few times before, periodically throughout your day, actually, whenever you want, you're sort of just short-circuiting the stress response continuously on purpose. And if you have a little bottle of rose oil and you put a few drops in your hand, you breathe it in for, you take 10 seconds and you just breathe it in. It's kind of like when we recommend breathing exercises. Of course, breathing exercises is a very powerful way to shift from sympathetic nervous system dominance to parasympathetic, to govern the autonomic nervous system, to relax us. Well, when you use fragrance, it just 10x's that. It's like when you use the right fragrance, when you smell a rose, we all soften. I mean, it's not, it's an attracting force. It's like the rose produces this oil to bring a pollinator there. And it can be like from miles away, a hummingbird finds a rose, and it's like, people use rose oil as perfumes forever and stuff. So it makes us feel more relaxed and safe and calm. So it's like one example of something we can use on a regular basis. And these subtle things I'm talking about. So now you're drinking your cup of lemon balm tea, you're breathing in some rose oil, and you're making a habit out of it. Maybe it's 2 or 3 cups of lemon balm tea and several different doses of the rose oil. And then meanwhile, you have a diffuser going in the background with some lavender, and you turn that on towards the evening when you want to like actually start to shift into a much more relaxed state. And it becomes something you can actually work with, like playing an instrument. You can work with your physiology as if you're sort of you're very present in your body, and you're realizing what it needs, and then you have all these small inputs from the plant world to course correct and adjust and catalyze these different feelings and sensations and functions. And that's the whole system that's in the book. But it's a very important way to understand it, because we think of these things as very, very subtle. But if we do them every day, it's not so subtle. It's not a sledgehammer. It's a retraining process for your nervous system. It's a subtle retraining about how the tension reaction builds up and how to turn it off, short circuit it.
Yeah. So the benefits exist, inherently in the compound that we're smelling and utilizing and whatever, but there's also like a conditioning and programmed response within our own selves of like, as we continue to utilize the different teas, the different smells, and the kind of journey that we get to go on throughout the day that you kind of painted in terms of having the cups of tea, then the diffuser in the background, then rubbing your hands together and utilizing essential oils. I feel like that makes the next domino of, let's say, relaxation or coming down, knock down faster the more that we utilize it, like training the dog, if you will, for lack of better words.
That's exactly
at
right.
The moment. But I know that for myself too. It's like when I utilize peppermint as an energizing, awakening thing, it's like it works because it works, but it also works because the intention is there. And so I love that what you illustrated.
And I'll just say, so that's what I would recommend a lot during the day, because we don't want a heavy, like I say again, like a sledgehammer. We don't want to knock ourselves out during the day. We want the clarity to be able to function. We want relaxed energy.
It's like grounded energy.
Yeah, but alert and clear. And like I said, if you untie those knots, you feel more clear. You feel like there's less like static electricity in your head, all the thoughts ricocheting off your skull, like competing for attention. So it's hard to grasp onto one thing and focus when there's like that much energy being like generated all the time and stuck and stagnating in your body. But when in the evening time, as I mentioned, I recommend a lot of times to people that they do some kind of ritual whenever their evening begins, whenever their work day ends. And a lot of us, especially entrepreneurs, have a hard time shutting off our work day. It's like we don't know where there is no boundary. And with phones and technology, there's no boundary. It's like something could come in and, hey, I'm working again. It's 9:00 at night. I was doing something totally different, but now I'm back at work.
Working from home too is also it's like, where are those boundaries within our home? I can just speaking for myself, like I'm entrepreneur. I run multiple businesses. I do it from my home. So I've like designated specific seats that I'm allowed to sit in when I'm working and when I'm eating and vice versa, because if not, it's like always open, and it's like to be able to compartmentalize is so powerful. I know for so many people.
Exactly. I mean, that's so that's what I'm referring to is that thing that a lot of people can obviously identify with and have, some understanding of. And even if it's not entrepreneurial, you're not working at home, it's like, there's still things. What I'm getting at is demarcating when we are now in a different mode called, I'm not doing that stuff anymore, and I'm going to draw a boundary, or however you want to phrase it, where it's no longer an option for us to, because we can't exist in those really intense brain waves all day and then into the night and randomly whenever, and then expect to rest and rejuvenate and replenish our nervous system. So what I had mentioned about, when you walk into a temple or you walk into a certain, a church or a cathedral or something, there would be these fragrances that are associated with these religious ceremonies. You can do something like that at the threshold where you want to demarcate, okay, I'm done with that stuff. So I recommend a lot of times people walk in the door, they put their keys down or whatever, and then they consciously use something such as one of these fragrances, and they're like, okay, I'm going to burn some resin of frankincense, or I'm going to burn some Palo Santo wood, or I'm going to turn on the diffuser and put some frankincense in there, or some rose or whatever, or just do some inhalations again. And it's just to demarcate, okay, now I'm shifting gears, and everything after this, I'm in the letting go phase, and I'm in the phase of letting my nervous system relax. There's nothing I have to do. And even if there are things you have to do, it's still, those rituals are very important for us, and plants are a nice Sherpa to sort of like usher us across those thresholds. And in the evening time, I recommend you could continue on with these herbs that are like these, what I call fragrant relaxants, the camomiles and the mints and the lindens and the rose and lavender. But also sometimes people like say after dinner, right, when you're going to go to sleep, some people like need to relax more. Now it's time for, you can bring a little bit more sedation in there, something a little heavier to start to really, really, really ground us and calm the nervous system. And there's many, many herbs that are deeply calmative to the nervous system, but they're not creating torpor or sort of like any like residual toxicity. Like, of course, you can drink alcohol and it's going to relax the nervous system, but it causes all these side effects that like over time are going to weaken the body and agitate and create more inflammation. I'm not saying never drink, but I'm saying it's not a good strategy to just rely on alcohol as like the primary way where you relax at night. I mean, take the edge off and stuff like that. So there are herbs, for example, skullcap is an herb from the Western herbal tradition, passion flower, California poppy, kava kava from Fiji in the South Pacific. CBD would fall into this category. Magnolia bark from Chinese medicine. There are medicinal plants, and there are many more that are, these ones you wouldn't want during the day so much because they actually do sedate. They calm the nervous system. They really make you feel heavier, a bit more groggy, not in a way that's like as heavy duty as sort of a trazodone or some kind of, like Ambien or something like that. It's not like that. It's gentler than that again, but it's very noticeable. And depending on the dose, it can usher us very reliably downward into sleep and into restful sleep. And so I often recommend that if you're going to use those, for example, most of those are pretty bitter tasting. They don't taste great. I don't usually use those as tea. They're oftentimes given in tincture form or in tablet or capsule or drops of some sort. And I recommend that people use those ones at night. So you have your sort of lighter duty ones, the essential oils and these herbs that relax the enteric nerves, keep you clear, but untie the knots, keep things flowing so there's not a lot of accumulated tension. But then in the evening, use the heavier ones, the ones that go deeper, the ones that are going to actually plunge us into deeper, more restful cycles of sleep and replenish the nervous system in that way. And so I often will recommend, and it's in the book, a methodology called pulse dosing. And then I won't go into the whole thing, but like basically, I'll just say this: when people consider medicinal plants and like valerian and hops and these things that you can get in the supplement section of like Whole Foods and other health food stores and stuff, one of the gripes or sort of the common misconceptions about medicinal plants that relax the nervous system is that they're too weak, compared to pharmaceuticals. They're great, they sound nice, but they don't work because they're not strong enough. And that's a misconception because, again, how they're being used, what they're being used, like what other methods are we using besides them in conjunction? Because, of course, you can knock yourself out with a pharmaceutical, but does anyone think, hey, I got that covered now. All I have to do is that, nothing else, and I feel great. Of course not. It's like there is no free lunch when it comes to like governing our body in a rational, like sane way. And also the dosage range is a very important consideration. So the pulse dosing method essentially looks like about 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, if you go to bed at like 10 or 11 or whatever it is, an hour or two after dinner, you take a dose. Maybe if it's a tincture of skullcap, you take a dose of the tincture, and that might look like a dropper full or 2 dropper fulls. This is malleable, adjustable, but say it's a couple dropper fulls and you have a little water. You just get this first dose of relaxation. It's mild. It's not enough to like knock you out, but you don't want to get knocked out at that time anyway. But it's the first input of sort of relaxation. Then maybe half an hour later, another couple of doses. Another dropper full, another 2 dropper fulls, a little sip of water. Second dose. Now it's 8:30. Okay. A little bit lower. Now 9 o'clock, do it again. And basically you do this in intervals. It doesn't have to be half an hour. It doesn't have to be an hour, 15 minutes. This is stuff I work out with people and people find through trial and error. But the point is this like small, subtle input spaced out and pulsed out over the course of the evening so that by the time you go to bed 2 hours, 3 hours later, and you've had 6 doses, very small, nothing heroic, no big giant, like, again, knock you out thing. But your body's getting trained to start to relax in the evening in a gentle way.
Going down stairs almost. That's exactly the visual I have, where it's like taking it down one step at a time, whereas like an Ambien or other thing like that will just like knock you down all the stairs and, you're done. Whereas you're kind of consciously taking those steps down into that relaxation mode, because that feels good too, to start becoming a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more tired, and then adding in a little bit more if you need it, and creating this like winding down process and kind of that other side of the bookend where we talked about what's energizing, what's stabilizing, what's going to help us focus and help our nervous system not all the way. And then when it's time to come home and shut off and draw that line in the sand of one state of being to another state of being, there's ways to, what did you call the process again? What was it called?
I call it pulse dosing.
Pulse dosing.
And when you think about the metaphor is like you drop a pebble into a pond and it creates some ripples across the pond. But by the time those ripples get to the edge, they might not even be visible anymore. Like the whole pond might have reestablished itself, whatever state it was in. But if you drop another one, 10 minutes later, another one, eventually you start to get those ripples washing up against the shore, because that constant small input has power when it's like repetitive, and a lot of times people want to knock themselves out. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't, like I said, that doesn't bode well long-term for sustainability, because first of all, the quality of sleep and the sleep cycles and stuff that people use, when they're taking pharmaceuticals long-term for sleep issues, the quality is diminished. It's not the kind of restorative sleep we want. It definitely messes with cognitive function the next day and so on and so forth.
And I find become reliant on it. Like even NyQuil or other maybe more mild or minor sleep aids you can just easily find without a prescription, whatever. It's like, yeah, it works when you keep taking that. And to your point of like alcohol, it's like the residual effects are not wonderful. And then you find yourself in states where you're like, oh, I can't sleep without it, or I need it to sleep. And that kind of reversal process of getting your body to like either use plant medicine and natural strategies to get to that relaxed state. I feel like that is another retraining process.
Right. And what you mentioned too, you were talking about adaptogens. One of my favorite adaptogens, ashwagandha, is very, very good for...
I love ashwagandha. I take it all the time. Well, in the evenings. And then a friend of mine made me like an ashwagandha elixir, which I love, a beverage. And it kind of has like this numbing effect, and it's really calming, and I love it. So yeah, I'm a huge...
I wonder if there's some kava in there.
I think there might be. Yeah, I think there might be. It's not just ashwagandha, but she gave it to me one day. I was at her house and she's like, try this, drink this in the evening. And I was like, okay. And I was like, this is really good. It was really relaxing and like it tasted good.
Yeah. Ashwagandha kava is different, of course, but ashwagandha by itself is very, very grounding. Its name, ashwagandha, is it's Withania somniferum is its Latin name, which means like sleep inducing. And it's one of these It's an adaptogen that's very unique because it's like a hybrid in a way of nervine and adaptogen. It has very potent effects of regulating hypercortisolemia and sort of like the aspect of our endocrine function that's jacked up in fight or flight. It helps to moderate that. It helps to sort of smooth out the ups and downs of the fight or flight response that's going on in the nervous system and neuroendocrine system when we're hyper excitable and sort of stressed out and stuff like that. And long term, that means it's an energy conservation herb because it helps us by smoothing out the sort of like reactivity of our endocrine system and our nervous system to stress. We're just wasting less energy in general. We're conserving energy that would otherwise been wasted in stress response, and then the second part of the stress response, which is like kind of the cleanup and the rebalancing of the whole system to like, which can kind of go on all the time for people. You know, it's meant to be a here and there kind of innate function of the body to sort of like address real acute threats, but it's obviously not meant to be something that's never turned off for not real acute threats, but perceived threats. So our baseline of stress can be way up here instead of like way down here where it occasionally has a blip because something stressful is going on. We're kind of like, if our set point gets too high, then even everything, small things make us reactive. And then there's, another stress response. And we never even get back to the restorative kind of normalization, nervous. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And ashwagandha is great for this on a regular basis to help address that energy wastage, first of all. But in the evening time, it's overtly kind of calming to the nervous system. Mm-hmm. So it helps us to, in the evening time, if we take a dose of ashwagandha in some form, oftentimes I like to mix it with some kind of plant-based milk, like oat milk and maybe a little nutmeg, sometimes some poppy seeds, you know, the kind that are in the spice rack, not the ones you get from like Afghanistan or something. That can be a very potent sleep elixir and calming elixir and a very strengthening overall to the whole endocrine system. So ashwagandha is a nice one. Reishi is another one, reishi mushroom. Very similar, not similar in how it's working, but reishi mushroom is one of the most important adaptogens in Japanese medicine, Chinese medicine for creating focus and calm. And basically when the nervous system's in this like, what do you call it? Wired and tired zone.
All coffee, none of the sleep and trying to run off the floor.
We're too wired to even relax. Like, you know, we're too jacked. We're overexcited, but and that leads us to become exhausted. But because of the overexcited, we can't relax. So it goes on and on.
Mm-hmm. So. And you mentioned the reishi mushrooms, and I want to talk specifically about mushrooms, mainly because I love them. I'm super interested in them. The whole structure of mycelium is so interesting to me. And I get targeted all the time on Instagram, and I know people listening do too, for like mushroom coffees, and it's good for your gut. And it's like, you know, just like I'm sure you've seen many things in your career where you're like, yeah, this has been amazing for many years, but somehow it just becomes like sexy in social media land and, you know, on whatever social media and all that kind of stuff. And I remember my mom sent me, like, she forwarded me ad that she found that was like, hey, is this good? And it was like a mushroom company brand, for example. And I remember being in Scotland once and we harvested chaga mushrooms and made like a tea out of it. And it was so, I mean, bitter, but just so good and so soothing. And so what do we need to know about mushrooms, you know, within the scope of this podcast and those that are listening that are looking for, just more information? And also, when I was really struggling hormonally, I really had to get rid of a lot of coffee and caffeine and a lot of things that were just like stressing my system out to the max. And I started drinking a lot more mushroom coffees and teas and things like that, and really still incorporate them to this day and still really enjoy them. So what are the benefits of mushrooms? Which ones should we be really focused on when it comes to like overall health and well-being, but specifically like we talked about, like nervous system, but also energy that's not so abrasive. Hey, really quick, I want to interrupt the podcast for just a minute to tell you about one of my favorite supplements for hair, skin, nails, digestive, and gut health. And that is Snap Supplements Super Greens with collagen. Now, if you're following me on social media, you've probably seen me post about this a bunch because honestly, this product tastes amazing and it's jam-packed with nutrients, like I said, to support healthy hair, skin, and nails. It helps support detoxification, a healthy immune system, and there's even probiotics in there for a healthy gut. It's non-GMO, no sugar added, soy-free, grass-fed collagen, and every scoop is going to give you 7 grams of protein. And this is why I love it, because it's not like a protein shake. It's just a scoop of powder. It tastes amazing. I put it in water, or if I want more hydration, I'll put it in coconut water and mix it up. And it's like having a nice, refreshing beverage that's packed with a bunch of super greens and protein. So what I'm super excited about is that for listening to the podcast, you'll get this discount here, nowhere else, but for listening to the podcast. You can save 25% off on all your Snap supplement purchases, including the super greens with collagen. And you do that by using code Lunden25 at checkout. That's LUNDEN 25. LUNDEN 25 to get 25% off at checkout. You can shop on snapsupplements.com or you can shop on my website, lifelikelondon.com/supplements. And you'll see there's already an additional 10% taken off. But you, because you're a podcast listener, you're going to get 25% off when you use the code Lunden25 at checkout. LUNDEN 25 at checkout to get your Snap supplements, super greens, and collagen, and all your Snap supplements for 25% off. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to mushrooms, and obviously, I mean, unpacking all the benefits would take forever because they're actually just they're amazing. You know, they're an amazing thing to incorporate into our lives and our routines on so many levels. I feel like, as I mentioned, reishi is a great one if you're also like reishi. When you were just mentioning coffee and coffee alternatives and sort of like energy, reishi is great because it actually has compounds in it that stabilize the nervous system, but also they enhance focus in general. Concentration. Like reishi is one of those ones that you hear about, you know, at least when you're learning Chinese and Japanese medicine. It's like the monk mushroom, you know, they call it they say it's like when you find reishi in the forest, it basically has like it's a spiritual herb. Basically, it's, you know, it actually like it's an aid to meditation and concentration. But lion's mane, for example, combined with reishi is a nice combination. And reishi has a bitter flavor, relatively bitter, and that's kind of nice for people who want that bitter coffee flavor without the caffeine, of course. So it makes a nice substitute for, or even additive to coffee if you want to like cut down on coffee, but you want to add something in there that's going to help to somewhat ameliorate some of the jitteriness and the nerve jangling that goes on with coffee. Reishi is a nice one to add in the morning. I often use it as a powdered extract. A powdered extract is a great way to consume medicinal mushrooms in general because most of their constituents are water soluble, but they're so big and fibrous and stuff like that just eating them as a powdered thing, you don't get enough of a dose most of the time because you're getting mostly the fiber and just relatively small amount of constituents. So powdered extracts are something where they boil them up for long periods of time, then they dehydrate the remaining bits of like sludge at the bottom, and then you've got basically like the most potent concentrated like extract you can get, and it's like great because it melts right into water or anything that you're drinking. All medicinal mushrooms have immune enhancing benefits, both short and long term immune enhancing benefits. So for acute manifestations or protective capacity, there are lots of different mushrooms that, like maitake and again reishi and shiitake and chaga is another one of these ones, and cordyceps, and all of them have that function in common. And so that's acute sort of protective. You know, cold and flu season, I take my daily mushroom supplement. When things are like people are going inside and there's a lot more possibility of getting sick because of stuff we're breathing in or whatever, but also long-term modulators of the immune system. They're very, very potent for the aspects of our immune system that are responsible for going around and scavenging different cells that are potentially aberrant or could become cancerous or could become or various autoimmune reactions that are going on where the immune system is hyperactive and is doing damage in some form to our system for different reasons, and that's complicated. But mushrooms in that circumstance, medicinal mushrooms, are very good to calm the immune system down, to get it to chill out. So they can be like good for long-term restorative or maintenance or protective ability when it comes to like bodily cleanup. What mushrooms do in the environment, they go out and they pop up where there's a rotting log, and they have to digest all that rot and congestion and turn it into soil and turn it into fertility for all the other plants in the forest. Well, then you can say metaphorically, they're doing that in our body too. From our immune system is one of its main jobs is to clean up material, dead cells, waste materials, and deep-seated pathogens of various sorts that are clogging up our system. Like basically get that immune system in there, get those mushrooms to catalyze the breakdown and removal of that congestion that would otherwise lead to not just, it's not decay, but like aberrant decay, like sort of like, like a dirty puddle where like other things can proliferate and form and stuff like that. So they clean up that. They're very, very much like a catalyst for turning on the intelligence of the immune system is what I would say.
I love that.
Yeah. And
immune system. Heck yeah.
So
cool.
They're very safe. They're extensions of our diet. They can be used regularly. They really have no major contraindications of any kind. I recommend, when it comes to say mushrooms, and I use them all the time, especially today. You have so many immune challenges. We just went through 3 years of COVID. It's these things, anything we can do to benefit our immune system. Why wouldn't we do it? Because the immune system is also, it's taking a hit on many levels. There's so much environmental toxins, and there's so many things that people have to contend with at the level of their nervous system and stress, and our diets are all over the place. And so the immune system is extremely important to maintain, to nourish and attend to regularly. And so I like to use medicinal mushrooms in every form. I'll have every morning I make a drink that has cordyceps and reishi powdered extracts in it. But during the day and during the week, now I would say 5 days out of the week, I'm consuming some kind of medicinal mushroom. I love to eat maitake, shiitake. I like to cook them into soups. I like to get the, what do you call it? Like what you do with shallots on the stove. You kind of
sear them,
toast them, sort of.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and then I was on a recent trip to Japan a couple months ago, and I brought back a whole bunch of shiitake mushroom powders as condiments that I can sprinkle on, but they're really potent and they have this great mushroom flavor. But you can get them at Japanese grocers. You can get them online. So I like to use them sometimes, and if I'm traveling, I'll use mushroom capsules. Like Paul Stamets, Host Defense, for example. I'll bring those with me and take those as a supplement. So I like to get them in various different forms and fashions, because when you do something, say mushrooms, anything you're doing when it comes to plant medicine, it works better when you mix it up a little bit in terms of the form you're taking it in. So your body doesn't get too used to it and accustomed to the same thing over and over and over and over again. Because different compounds come out in different forms. For example, there's some compounds, for example, in reishi will come out in an alcoholic extract, like a tincture, or in China, you'll find them as wines a lot of times, or Korea, you'll find mushroom wines all the time, just low amounts of alcohol, but certain things like the ganodermic acids in reishi are better extracted in an alcohol, and then other ones are better extracted in water, and some are good just to eat entirely, the mushroom. So I've said a lot. I know I don't want to.
So good, and I'm so interested because I'm looking at your book now, the page on mushrooms, which is $3.29, I guess, for those of you that eventually get the book. But they're so beautiful. And I remember two instances. So one, I was in North Carolina with a friend of mine, Dr. Lulu, who's a naturopathic doctor. And she's like, let's go harvest lion's mane. I heard there was some on this trail. Turkey tail. I heard there's some on this trail. Like, let's go get it. And it was so much fun. When I lived in Austria, it was such an adventure, and it was like so great. And now knowing more of what I know now about mushrooms is like so cool. And then when I lived in Austria, we did mushroom harvesting to make a goulash. So we went out in the woods and learned like which ones you should eat, which ones could kill you, like all the different things. And it was such a great experience. So I guess I just share that because I think sometimes we forget that there's like really cool activities or ways that we can explore and do something fun while also incorporating plants as medicine. And it just made me think of that now because I just recently moved to a different state, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what like plant medicine adventures I could go on now, because a lot of it we can find and easily access sometimes when we go out in Mother Nature and on Earth. And then of course with, supplements and powder and like things we could order online too. But I just wanted to share that to kind of open the door or window for people listening of thinking like, oh, that's interesting. Like maybe I could do something like that. So then it's not just like another list of supplements we need to take and make sure that we add into our routine, but it could be like an experience and a fun thing to do with others.
Oh gosh, you're singing my song. That's like that's what originally got me into it in the first place. This whole subject is just like noticing the plants around my environment and then noticing, hey, I don't know where any of this stuff is. When I was in, my late high school years even, and where I grew up in Massachusetts, and I would walk around Walden Pond, which was near my house. And I was looking at all these trees and flowers and plants. And I'm like, what is all this stuff? I don't even know. Why didn't anyone teach me? And I had to learn it myself through field guides and so on and so forth. But realizing that there's medicine all over the place. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't even know that, a lot of the plants, I mean, of course, when we really understand, even I'm here in LA, in Santa Monica, and if you walk around the neighborhood here, I can point out tons of plants that are medicinal, that are just ornamentals that people plant as because they look nice, or ones that are weeds that find a little corner of a lot to grow in. And it's really empowering to know how to use medicinal plants for healing and for medicine. Like you said, it's a fun adventure, and it's an amazing process to make a part of your life. And it's also really empowering, and it gives you a real sense of place too. When you can understand, you feel more indigenous to where you are. Mm-hmm. You understand what the plants are around you, whether they were used for fuel or shelter or food or medicine. That creates a feeling of at being at homeness that I think a lot of us in a culture where we move around a lot, we're always, going from one urban environment to another, or a lot of times or whatever. It's nice to know wherever I land, that's kind of the first thing I key into is what are these plants? I'll start grabbing little leaves and smelling them and being like, that's an interesting, a lot of essential oils in that one. And if I don't know what it is, I'll go look it up, or I'll use an app to figure out what it is. And then I might say, oh, who used this before, in the past? What peoples use this and for what? And that's ethnobotany. I mean, that's very fascinating,
Yeah. And it's cool to stay curious, and I think it's so easy for us to be like, I don't know, let's go here and do this, or go to the bar and drink, or there's so many socially things we think we're just supposed to do that I like sharing, oh, maybe you can get your friends together and go figure out what's in your backyard or in your own neighborhood and hire a guide, or there's so many things available that allow us to learn and be curious, that I hope at least one person listening is inspired to switch, a girls' night from being at the bar to being like, hey, let's go out and discover the herbs and medicine that's in our backyard. At least that's the kind of thing that I like to do, and I think is really fun. Your book, The Plant Medicine Protocol, Unlocking the Power of Plants for Optimal Health and Longevity. I love this book. It's so gorgeous. It's a gold mine. There's so many amazing recipes in it. There's so much knowledge, but then so many ways we can bring this into our home, a ton of smoothie recipes, a ton of elixirs, golden milk, which is one of my personal favorites that I love and incorporate regularly. So I just want everyone listening to get a copy, The Plant Medicine Protocol by William Siff. And this is like, it's so beautiful. And I love having it just like sitting and on display. And so I think it makes such a great gift too, as well, for people that we know are interested in this type of thing, or maybe want to gift something to somebody else. I just think there's so much wisdom in this. And I'm so grateful for what we got to tap into today. So let us know where we can find the book, how we can connect with you even more, so that our listeners know where they can, dig deeper with you.
Thank you for the compliment on the book. I appreciate that. It's the book I wrote. It took three plus years, but it's really like the 20-year thesis that's in that book. That's why it's so heavy. 3 pounds that book weighs. It's
like the textbook you get excited to read.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I'm really glad. I'm very happy the way it turned out. I left nothing on the field when it came to that book. The book is available everywhere, but Amazon and all. I just saw it at an independent around my neighborhood the other day. It's available all over the place, I think, and it's available in the UK. It just got translated into Slovenian, which I think is kind of interesting. My website, williamsiff.com, that's available to you. I mean, that's also where I house my practice. The latest gold thread tonics, which are available all over the country, thousands of stores and online. That is a tonic company I started a few years back, and it's really taken off and is doing really well. And it is a way for people to consume these medicinal plants that I'm talking about in the book and we talked about today on a regular basis in a really easy and tasty way, because it's a low investment, something you get on your lunch break. It's not some high powered supplement, but they're potent. I put enough herbs in them to make sure that you're getting a clinical dose of herbs in a way that's agreeable and tasty and delicious. And I really wanted to make something because there wasn't anything on the market. And I always found that I can talk about this till I'm blue in the face, but when you try the herbs, it's a whole different experience. It's like when the body meets the medicinal plants directly, that's when the real magic happens. That's when people be like, oh, I get it. This is something I get,
Yeah.
So that's available.
And they're super delicious. I've tried a variety of the flavors. I think I shared this with you before we pressed record, but the Hawaiian ginger flavor is my favorite. It's just so potent. And I love that they're not full of sugar just to make them taste good. Like the green one,
no sugar,
tastes green, like greens. And my friend Kara, actually, she came back from Mexico after being at this wonderful wellness retreat. And she's like, oh, every morning I would have a green juice and all the things. And now I'm back to work and in my flow. And I was like, sent her a picture. I was like, oh, go buy these. Go buy the
I saw
one
that.
of the gold tonic. And she wrote me and she's like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, because it's easy and effortless to grab them at the store and open them up and have them ready to go. Plus they're really potent and so delicious. And I love them. Thank you. They're so good.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. And we go all over the world to get those ingredients. One of my main skills is, as a clinician, or ethnobotanist, is curation. So I make sure that Hawaiian ginger, it's 100% Hawaiian ginger. It's not just saying that. And it comes from Kauai. I went there and sourced it myself and found this amazing, gigantic ginger farm that's you see whales breaching from the farm and rainbows, over the farm. It's I make sure that what's in these things is actually the best medicinal plants on earth that I could possibly find, and I know how to find them. So those things, all of those ways, that's how you find me. And then,
I love that. Your book, your website, the gold tonic beverages. I'm so grateful that you were here today. I feel like, I don't know, we could have just talked about all the things all day, which I love. It makes me excited to dive even deeper into your book, and also just get more excited about the everyday ways that we can use plant as medicine. Is there anything that you want to share as final words, something that you're excited about, or a message that you feel called to share to the people that you didn't already share today?
Whoa, that's a lot of pressure at the end here. I think I shared a lot. I think we had a great conversation. Like you said, this conversation could go on and on and on. It's this format of podcasts, and I do them fairly frequently. And I go out and in a couple nights, I'm going out to Noya House in Hollywood. I'm going to do people can come to that. I'm going to do what's called a plant venture. And essentially what a plant venture is I pass around all these things we're talking about that I've gotten, around the world. I have a little backpack and I just pull out these different remedies and I pass them around to people and I explain what they're about, but I try to facilitate the contact and the connection between the plants and the people, or plants and people. And that's the best way to learn this subject. That's the way it's always been
Plant
taught.
ventures.
Yeah, I mean, but plant venture, plant venture is a word I made up to describe this process of okay, let's not just talk about the beneficial effects and the compounds in here and stuff, but let's experience it. Now, you tell me what you're experiencing and I'll tell you what's happening and I'll, verify it. And then, try this one and try this one. And by the time people go through it, they feel charged up and their body feels totally different. And then they really see what the power of medicinal plants is all about. And you can do that in your own house. I mean, the idea is there's this, I'll end with this, is that there's this tale in the book I tell, but we learn it in, when we learn Chinese medicine, and I certainly heard the tale of this in Asia, but there's this guy named Shen Nong, who's like the patron saint of herbal medicine in China and other things. But he's credited with writing the first big giant book on herbal medicine. And his methodology, they said he had a transparent body. That's the myth, because his methodology was he would live up in the mountains and he would pick these herbs, and his students would pick these herbs, and then they would taste them and smell them and try them in this contemplative way and experience their effects going through their body, using concentration, using contemplative practice, and being in a nice environment out in nature where the mind can be very tranquil and pay attention to things. And then he would actually watch what they're doing in the body. They would experience it. Oh, it's going into the liver and it's doing this, and it's going into the stomach and it's going in the intestines. This one's going up to the brain and it's doing this. And that's why I say he's a transparent body, because he was using his own senses to unravel and unpack what these medicinal plants were doing in real time as an actual experience. And that, using our own bodies in that way, I think is one of the most powerful. That's how I was taught how to use medicinal plants, along with all the book learning. But I think that's something that's interesting. If you're interested in this subject, next time you're out at a restaurant, say you're at a Japanese restaurant, pay attention to that wasabi and that fresh ginger and that green tea. When you're eating and you have the black pepper on the table, put it on there consciously and pay attention to what it's doing in your body. When you're looking at the spice rack, take off the cover of the cinnamon, smell it, and really get into it. Use your senses. Let the plants actually be a grounding rod to get you back into your body, and it will, demystify a lot of this. And it makes life really fun to have a medicinal plant lifestyle, because you have all these unique, novel experiences to look forward to all day, adorning your day. You've got your reishi mushroom and coffee in the morning, and you got your ginger tea in the afternoon, and you got your fragrances diffusing around the house, and then you chop up some cilantro and basil to put on your food, and then you eat some garlic, and then you take your skull cap to calm you down. These are really unique and novel experiences, and they reconnect us to ourselves and to nature. And more I could say. I know our time's up, but I just wanted to
No, that's good. I love it. I have so much good stuff. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. I'll put all the links to your book, your website, and your beverage company in the description, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on the podcast. So then you can get connected with William and dive deeper into this topic. Thank you, William, for your time. I appreciate you. I'm excited for all you've done in the world and what you continue to do. It's so inspiring to me. And thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. Thanks, Lunden.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast. Hey, do me a favor. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, give us a review. This really helps a lot. And share this with a friend. I'm only one person, and with your help, we can really spread the message of self-love and sweat and change more lives all around the world. I'm Lunden Souza, reminding you that you deserve a life full of passion, presence, and purpose, fueled by self-love and sweat. This podcast is a Hit Spot Austria production.